This just in from the ReliaQuest Bowl. Michigan catching all 16.5 points against Alabama. Didn't need them today out in Tampa, Florida. 19-13 as Michigan ends its season 7-5. Couple of big wins against Ohio State and now Bama. And they did the last two victories without throwing for more than 100 yards. Jalen Milroe, 50% throwing, $192 with a pick and a touchdown as Michigan ends up winning out there in Tampa. All right, let's bring in Chip Patterson of the Cover 3 podcast. So, Chip, I hadn't talked to you about a pick before this game. I didn't know how it played out the way that you thought, but what did we see out in the field today?
Oh, nothing like what I expected. That is for sure. I think that for Alabama, that's where you have to start because it's a team that you mentioned the pick. They start as a 13.5-point favorite. It races out to 17 or so prior to kickoff. As word begins, is official, Jalen Milroe will be out there. You know, you see Orion Williams out there, and you think that this Crimson Tide team is going to absolutely roll over Michigan as previous Crimson Tide teams have before. But I think what was put plain and simple is that as much as they might have the same helmets and the same uniforms and the same quarterback as when they won the SEC championship 1 year ago, from top to bottom, and I do mean the very top, this is not the same Alabama team. This is not the same Alabama program. We cannot apply, Tommy, the expectations and the standards of the previous regime and have them move forward with Kalen DeBoer. Because in losing this game, Alabama's streak of 16 consecutive double-digit win seasons has come to a close. Alabama finishing 9-4. It makes Alabama's win against Georgia look like a complete mirage. And the team that we saw today was much closer to a team that lost to Oklahoma than it was to a team that was ready to contend for the national championship in the college football playoff. They were sloppy out the gate. They were unable to be able to sustain the drives they needed to climb back into the game in the second half. And basically all of the flaws have all come together, unfortunately for Alabama and Kalen DeBoer, on a very, very big stage against an opponent who, outside of Ohio State, I don't think anybody thought that they had this in them.
Yeah, it's interesting to see what the offseason is going to be like for Kalen DeBoer. What do you think that's going to be like, Chip?
Pressure-packed. There is going to be a lot of emphasis on what happens in the transfer portal. There's going to be a lot of emphasis on any coaching changes that could be made off that group that he put together, which, remember, he lost assistants off his first staff to the NFL. You know, Ryan Grubb getting hired as an offensive coordinator for the Seattle Seahawks and other changes that happened very late in the game. So I think that coaching staff changes are going to be of high interest for Alabama fans. Transfer portal work, the future for Jalen Milroe. You know, all these things are going to come together, but I don't think there are enough changes that can be made for Alabama to just hit a couple buttons and jump right to the front of the line once again. Because when we think about the programs that are setting the pace and setting the standard in the SEC, and to me, the answers to that are Georgia and Texas, the teams that played for it. They have stacked class upon class upon class, both out of high school and the transfer portal, in a way that Alabama is going to require multiple cycles to be able to catch up in terms of having depth. Now, do I think they have enough high-end talent to just rocket right to the top if they get perfect fumble luck and injury luck and everything else? Absolutely. Kalen DeBoer's been a winner every single place that he's been before, but I just think that you are seeing a program that, with the mass exodus after Nick Saban's retirement and with the unsettled nature of that roster all through spring practice, was just a couple laps behind in the race that is the SEC.
One more thing on Bama with Jalen Milroe. I was doing a segment with one of our draft analysts, Chris Trapasso, this week. He had him actually 5th overall. What do you think this game did for Milroe, and what do you anticipate he'll do when it comes to draft time, you think?
I mean, undeniably, it hurts it. I mean, the draft nicks and tape grinders, they like to look at an entire body of work. And Jalen Milroe's unique athleticism is going to be attractive to any NFL team. But I don't know if going to the NFL is 100% where this ends for Jalen Milroe. He might be back at Alabama. He might seek other options in college, because what we have seen from him this season was not even as good as when he really caught his stride in the back half of 2023. So this performance and a lot of performances throughout the season. Again, go back to that Oklahoma game when they only got 3 points on the road in Norman, sitting in the driver's seat for the SEC championship. Jalen Milroe was put on the biggest stage possible on a 4th and a mile against Auburn last season, and he delivered one of the plays of the year. And yet this season, we were not able to see anything close to the same type of clutch ability to rise up and answer the call. He uniquely talented, yes. If you want to draft him 5th overall based on what you think his skills can be in your system, I get it. But this, to your question, this bowl did nothing to help his draft stock.
To be fair, Trapasso, who had him ahead of Shedeur Sanders, said it would be a bit of a project that the Cleveland Browns, who had that selection at the time, would be looking towards the future a year or two. But again, this bowl game not doing him any type of favors. Chip, this game last year between the two teams had so much at stake, and Michigan obviously getting it done with Jim Harbaugh wins it all. They didn't have the season, according to Sharon Moore, that he anticipated and the expectation in Ann Arbor, but the last 2 wins have certainly proved that they're on the right track. So is it fool's gold going into next year? If they apply the right amount of pressure, they can come up diamonds, you think, in 25?
No, I'm so glad that we've got the spotlight on Michigan, because I do think there is a lot of real things to be excited about coming out of this win. Yeah, there's the surface level stuff. You just beat Ohio State and Alabama in the same football season. Whoa, 2 years in a row for the Wolverines on that one. But think about all the opt-outs that this Michigan defense had, and yet they still showed up and kept Jalen Milroe in check. They still kept that high-end skill talent in check. They limited Alabama to just 13 points in this football game without surefire 1st and 2nd round NFL draft picks on the defensive side of the football. If you were concerned about what that was going to be like, Wink Martindale didn't come in necessarily carrying the highest expectations, but the way that he called this game, the way that he game planned to slow down Alabama, and the way the talent showed up, a lot of them backups throughout the entire season. If I'm a Michigan fan, I am fired up about the way that our defense is going to maintain that high standard as we look ahead to 2025. Now, on the offensive side, there is all focus is going to be on Bryce Underwood, and all focus is going to be on what it's going to look like with all the turnover that they've had in terms of preparing for 2025 on offense. That might be more of a project, but my confidence would be in Sharon Moore, because Sharon Moore has guided this team through a year that fell short of expectations. They started as a top 10 team. They weren't the first team that you mentioned for the Big Ten title, but you thought that they would be closer. And those early losses were massively disappointing. But I was in Ann Arbor in a game where they really went blow for blow for about a quarter and a half with Oregon. Now, obviously, they get the win in Columbus against Ohio State, and they finish it against Alabama. There is something about the DNA and the culture that has bled over from the Jim Harbaugh era to the Sharon Moore era, where even when you are suffering adversity, even when you are falling short of expectations, they still have enough pride in that program of playing for the University of Michigan that they are going to show up, because bowl season is all about motivation. And I saw one team have a big motivation edge here in this game.
Future looking bright. The Bryce Underwood era is going to be fun. And they also got Mikey Keene from Fresno State just as maybe insurance in the transfer portal as well. So it'll be an interesting offseason for both programs. Chip Patterson joining us from the Cover 3. Tom Fornelli, Danny Cannell, Bud Elliott. Scan the QR code. Again, getting you ready for the college football playoff quarterfinals and the rest of bowl season.